Tourists usually travel to Gaspé to visit Percé Rock and the hordes of seabirds on Bonaventure Island. In July 1954, there's another attraction, a murder trial in the old Gaspé courthouse. A dozen reporters from big city newspapers have made their way to this remote village. They line up for the few available seats, awaiting their first look at an accused killer. The case is Rex versus Coffin. The charge that between June and July of the year 1953, Wilbert Coffin, alias Bill Coffin, did deliberately and knowingly kill and assassinate Richard Lindsay, thus committing murder. The verdict, guilty. The sentence, death by hanging. The murder case of Wilbert Coffin is one of the most bizarre in Canadian legal history. To some, Coffin was a killer who shot 3 men in cold blood. But to many Canadians, he was an innocent man railroaded to the gallows by the corrupt Union Nationale government of Maurice Duplessis. Coffin's supporters vowed to put an end to capital punishment because, they said, if the system could hang Wilbert Coffin, it could hang anyone. Among those caught up in the events that followed his execution was a Montreal lawyer named Pierre Elliott Trudeau.
It's truly, in terms of the legal history of this country, it's the case that haunted Trudeau. It's the case, I think, that affected Trudeau the most in terms of why we had to abolish the death penalty in Canada in 1976. Coffin became the expression of the word doubt. And when you have a doubt in a case where someone can die, it also became the symbol of why this country had to abolish the death penalty.
Quebec in those days was very different than the Quebec of today. It was Duplessis' Quebec. It was very, very, it was not a dictatorship. We didn't use that word, but it has some similarity with totalitarian states, I would say. And the justice system was in the hands of the then premier and boss of the province.
Duplessis, ce dictateur.
Duplessis was known simply as Le Chef. He was both premier and attorney general, and he personally ran the Quebec provincial police. Many of his officers were little more than uniformed thugs. Duplessis directed the investigation and the prosecution of Wilbert Coffin. He was relentless in seeking Coffin's conviction and a sentence of death. Wilbert Coffin may have been a killer. A coroner's jury, a Quebec Superior Court jury, the Quebec Court of Appeal, and the Supreme Court of Canada all judged him guilty. But the doubt persisted, and with it a growing belief Canada had taken the life of an innocent man. As for Coffin, he was still proclaiming his innocence as the hangman sent him plunging to his death. The Gaspé region is one of Canada's scenic treasures. It's a vast peninsula reaching out into the Gulf of St. Lawrence. Picturesque villages dot the shoreline. At the tip of the peninsula is Gaspé Village, tucked into a bay that faces the Gulf. To the south is Percé, its giant rock shaped by centuries of pounding by the waves. It attracts thousands of tourists in the summer. Inland, there's a different kind of visitor. Campers and hunters flock to the heavily forested Chic-Choc Mountains. Many of the hunters are Americans, and today, as in the 1950s, they are important to the economy of this poor region of Quebec. The Gaspé was home to Bill Coffin. He knew all the back roads and trails. In 1953, he was trying his hand at prospecting. His younger sister, Marie Stewart, worshipped her big brother.
tall, dark, and handsome. And he did some prospecting, but his trade was cooking. He was an excellent cook. He was able to do many things. He could turn his hand to anything. We were a very happy family. We had a lot of fun, a lot of laughter. He was so kind. He would do anything for anyone. He would give the last cent that he had if he thought it would help somebody.
June 10th, 1953. Bill Coffin heads home after a day of prospecting. On an old logging road, he finds some hunters from Pennsylvania in need of help. Their truck won't start. Eugene Lindsay has brought his young son Richard and a family friend, Frederick Clark, hoping to shoot some of the Gaspé's numerous black bears. Eugene Lindsay decides the truck needs a new fuel pump. Bill Coffin offers to bring one back from Gaspé, 60 miles away. 17-year-old Richard Lindsay goes to town with him.
And that was what he was like. He would never go by without giving a helping hand if he could. Never.
A number of people see Coffin and young Lindsay in town that day. They pick up a fuel pump, then head back into the bush and the broken-down truck. Much later, Bill Coffin would describe meeting two different Americans at the scene, saying they drove a Jeep with a yellow plywood cab. He said he had some food and beer with the hunting party, got $40 for his trouble from the senior Lindsay, then left to drive deeper into the woods to camp and prospect. What happened at the campsite that night will never be known. On July 8th, Frederick Clark's father phones Gaspé police. He hasn't heard from Eugene Lindsay and the two boys for a month, and he's worried. The local constable questions a few townspeople and soon discovers that Bill Coffin was the last person to see the Americans alive, and Coffin has disappeared.
We had no idea that it would go as far as it did. And all started because my brother stopped and was going to help them with a fuel pump, I think it was. Yeah. I often wonder if he had just kept on, what a difference it would have made if he hadn't have stopped.
Search parties are quickly organized, and local hunting guides and woodsmen head into the bush. The Americans' abandoned truck is found July 10th. On the 15th, searchers discover the body of Eugene Lindsay. Bill Coffin reappears in Gaspé on July 20th, joining in the search for the two boys. He even poses with a police officer for a news photographer. The other two bodies are found a few days later. Bears have mauled all three bodies and scattered the bones. Police are baffled until they find a bullet hole in the jacket of young Lindsay and a second in his underwear where the bullet exited his body. Clear evidence the Americans had been murdered. American hunting and fishing organizations almost immediately demand an arrest. Writer Jacques Hébert says Premier Duplessis knew what he had to do.
What happened is that Duplessis just said to his police and law entourage, because he was also the Attorney General of Quebec, to get the man. And they found this poor Coffin that was a suspect.
This was one of the most politically charged trials that I think we've ever seen in Canada.
In the Gaspé and many other regions of northern Quebec, spending by the American hunting and fishing fraternity is the mainstay of the local economy.
And so when three of its members are killed in a murder, then that murder better be solved, and that guy better be executed by a country called the United States of America that execute more people than almost any other country on earth under their legal system. And so they made it clear to Canada, you get this guy, and you get him quick, and you try him, and you execute them.
Premier Duplessis sends in a team he knows will get results.
He acted by bringing in his toughest cop into the Gaspé, where the policeman didn't belong, and he brought in the two best prosecutors in the province and sent them to the Gaspé, where they didn't belong, because they needed that conviction, and they went out of their way to make sure that they would get Wilbert Coffin.
Captain Alphonse Matt, a cop with a brutal reputation, takes over the investigation. Noël Dorion, Quebec's overbearing senior prosecutor, is assigned the case. Duplessis himself takes personal charge of the investigation and prosecution. In his 1963 book, 2 of 3 he wrote on the case, Jacques Hébert accused them all of assassinating Wilbert Coffin. 40 years later, he still believes an innocent man was put to death.
I identified what I call the assassins of Coffin. That is to say, the police people, like Alphonse Matt and others, that have worked directly on the case and eliminated any kind of evidence that would have helped Coffin, and very often fixing up evidence that would help condemn him. Whoever remembers the case would have the conviction that he was innocent, and he was nevertheless hanged. So we have that on our conscience forever.
Bill Coffin makes some incriminating decisions in the weeks after the murders. Everyone knows he was the last person to see the American hunters alive. The local police want to talk to him, but Coffin disappears.
This program is brought to you by Clarica, health insurance, life insurance, and investments. Next week, the massive forest fire that ravaged northern Ontario in 1916. Then, confronting 19th century birth control laws in 20th century Ontario. Next week on History Television. To prove their royalty, Egyptian pharaohs displayed a crook and a flail. But to keep it, they used a dagger. A month of passion, ambition, and murder that ruled one of the world's great civilizations. Egypt Month begins Tuesday, April 6th on History Television.
As a Clarica advisor, I know there are a number of choices when it comes to health insurance and life insurance. Finding the right solution for you. Now that requires clarity. The kind of clarity that comes from a Clarica advisor. To find an advisor for your insurance needs, visit Clarica.com, because there's a lot to be said for clarity. Clarica. Health insurance, life insurance, investments.
You think about roads, how each one is different. Then you build a family of cars that helps make them all the same. The 2004 Volvos with electronically controlled all-wheel drive.
Honey, what do you say? I take care of all this.
That'd be great.
Oh, man. Look at that. We're out of soap. I guess these dishes will have to wait.
There's plenty left.
A little Dawn does a lot of greasy dishes. More greasy dishes than the leading lemon brand while suds last.
Nice try.
Get more done with Dawn. Takes grease out of your way.
The sweet taste of Honey Nut Cheerios comes from honey and nuts and the goodness of Cheerios.
Now your kids can go on their very own adventure with Stuart Little. One Stuart Little 2 CD-ROM game comes free inside specially marked boxes of General Mills cereal. It's one of 6 fun games to collect.
This week On Modern History Mondays, on April 11th, 1945, 1,000 children were liberated from the concentration camp at Buchenwald. 426 were sent to France. This is their story.
Those who were there remained friends. That friendship is the source of hope and strength.
The Boys of Buchenwald, Monday at 8. Part of Modern History Mondays on History Television.
The murder scene provides little evidence for Captain Matt and his investigators. They have the abandoned truck. There is no sign of the new fuel pump, and the truck won't run. They have parts of 3 bodies, 2 in one location, and that of Eugene Lindsay 5 miles away. Bones and clothing provide solid identification of the 2 youths, Richard Lindsay and Frederick Clark. But so much is baffling. The party's 4 rifles are found. They have not been fired. Although the truck has been stripped of camping gear, a camera is untouched in the cab. A watch and a valuable ring are found near the bodies of the 2 young men. Eugene Lindsay's wallet is not found near the remains of his body. It's discovered later, 200 yards away on the bank of the St. John River. It's empty. Matt's investigators set out to trace Wilbert Coffin's trail after he left the American hunters with their broken-down truck. They find he had been in Montreal, visiting his common-law wife, Marion Petrie. Petrie and Coffin have an 8-year-old son named Jimmy. Police spend weeks finding every place Coffin has been on his trip and accounting for every dollar he spent. He left a trail a mile wide, telling everyone who he was and where he was from. He was not trying to hide. 3 weeks after returning to Gaspé to help in the search for the 2 missing hunters, Wilbert Coffin is taken into custody. He will never be a free man again. Coffin is being held by the police as a material witness in late August when a coroner's inquest is held into the Americans' deaths. But he is not called to testify. What happens at the inquest demonstrates the ruthlessness of Maurice Duplessis and his henchmen. In Percé, Premier Duplessis' hand-picked prosecutor, Noël Dorion, takes an unusual interest in the deliberations of the coroner's inquest.
Dorion was already there. Just imagine this big, fat, important lawyers in Percé. Why? Because Duplessis wanted to make sure that the case would be settled quickly and efficiently.
The coroner, a local doctor, has examined the hunter's remains. The 6-man jury has all the evidence known to Captain Matt and his squad of provincial police officers. But the jury is not allowed to hear from Wilbert Coffin, the last man to see them alive. The jury finds Frederick Clark and Richard Lindsay had been shot by a person or persons unknown. Since the skull and torso of Eugene Lindsay were never found, it ascribes his death to causes unknown. Noël Dorion, Duplessis' star prosecutor, is furious.
Dorion at that point came into a rage, and he said to the jury, "You go back into your room and I'll tell you what to do." And he sent back the jury into the jury room, went with them, and told them that they were wrong and that they have to change their judgment or their decision. And that he said, in any case, and he put his hand in his pocket, I have, un mandat d'arrestation, in order to arrest him, coming directly from the Procureur General, which was Duplessis himself. So the whole thing was arranged. So the jury, in front, just imagine these simple Gaspé people that were, fishermen or whatever. They were just flabbergasted, frightened by this huge lawyer, so important, coming from Quebec, especially for that. So they came back and they changed their judgment.
The unsophisticated jury accepts the finding dictated by Dorion. It now reads, on the form of evidence presented, our verdict is that Wilbert Coffin be held responsible in connection with the death of Richard Lindsay and Frederick Clark. In the end, Coffin is only charged with killing Richard Lindsay. Only his clothing showed entry and exit bullet holes. Soon after, Captain Matt puts Wilbert Coffin through a Gestapo-like interrogation in a cell under the fire hall. Although Coffin hasn't been charged with a crime, the interrogation is brutal and prolonged.
They had these terrifically hot lights beaming down on my brother, and he'd fall asleep, and they would grab him by his hair and they'd haul his head up and question him again. That went on for hour after hour after hour.
Coffin's ordeal goes on for 16 days as Captain Matt tries to wring a confession from his prisoner. Lawyer Edward Greenspan has studied the Coffin case. He cites it often when he is lecturing law students.
16 days in a basement of a fire hall. It's such an enormous amount of time to be there without being informed of the right to lawyer. I mean, right now we have a Charter of Rights where if they keep you for more than 20 minutes without telling you of your right to retain and instruct a lawyer and you getting a lawyer, then they've committed a constitutional error. There for 16 days they interrogated a man, kept him away from his family in order to try to get a confession.
In Montreal, the police throw Marion Petrie into a jail cell. They tell her they'll keep her there unless she agrees to testify against Bill Coffin, her common-law husband and father of her son. Her testimony will prove very damaging. Marion Petrie was terrified at being held in a jail cell. She would later say that when she gave the police a statement and agreed to testify, she thought Bill Coffin might have been involved in a robbery.
We were all treated as criminals. The police used to come up and they would just go through the house, the woodshed, the garage, searching, and just as if they owned it. We were very frightened. We had no idea what was going to happen. We had no idea that it would go as far as it did.
With the damning finding by the coroner's jury affixing responsibility to Coffin, Captain Matt formally charges him with the murder of young Richard Lindsay. The Quebec City lawyer who sells himself to the Coffin family is Raymond Mahar. He plays a very strange role in the Coffin drama. He seems to have close family connections to Noel Dorion, the prosecutor.
You know, you wonder if we hadn't have been so trusting. Because the lawyer told us so many things. You know, he gave us to believe that put our trust in him, he was going to help us. Bill wasn't going to be executed, he was going to get him off, and this went on and on and on, a pack of lies.
He was badly defended by an incompetent drunk.
The prosecution spends a fortune rounding up scores of witnesses. Some said it was the most expensive trial ever held in Quebec. It's far too expensive for the impoverished county government, so Quebec City picks up the cost. The scales of justice are badly out of balance as Wilbert Coffin enters history's courtroom.
You're IT guys, right?
Yeah.
Okay, you gotta help me. My computer has a virus. I've got to email a presentation or I'm dead. It's for a board meeting. Maybe you just rip out the hard drive.
Oh, no.
Just press the blue button and follow along.
That's it?
That's it.
That's it?
That's it. That easy.
That's it.
You ever tried decaf?
Stress-free wireless, only on a ThinkPad with Intel Centrino mobile technology. You know the clean, natural freshness of clothes dried outdoors? Now you can capture it indoors. Introducing Downy Clean Breeze, the unmistakable line-dried freshness of new Downy Clean Breeze. It touches so much more than clothes.
If it's a tough stain, just blot with a sponge, rub with your thumbs, then take the toothbrush and work it in a counterclockwise motion. Really work it in. You've got muscles, use them.
Or pre-treat with new Tide Stain Brush.
Its rotating bristles are gentle on fabrics, tough on stains, easy on you.
Can you ever be too rich? Not when it comes to your hair color. Hydrience is so moisture-rich, it's goodbye dry, hello rich radiance. Hydrience from Claro, color wonderful.
I'm glad you called AIG Assurance about Funeral Coverage Plus.
With the high cost of funerals, it's important that we both have insurance coverage. I just wasn't sure it would fit into our budget.
But our premiums are only about $1 a day. Will I sleep better knowing I won't leave you with financial burdens?
And when I go, the kids will get a little money. Nothing's more important than our family.
Your acceptance is guaranteed if you're 50 to 75 with no serious illness. Call now. There's no medical exam and no salesperson will visit. Your premiums will never increase and your coverage will never decrease. With Funeral Coverage Plus, up to $15,000 goes to your beneficiary within 48 hours, tax-free. Call now for your free information kit and final planning guide.
Grandma, Grandpa!
Protect your family. Call now, toll free, 1-800-226-2263.
Changing body positions during your period puts you at greater risk of leaks. That's why only Always Ultra has dry weave to help lock wetness away and an absorbent cord that turns liquid into gel. For protection at any angle, always.
The meeting's at 8. We got 5 minutes to get there.
Go around this guy. He's not even moving.
With a class-leading 250 horsepower V6 engine, the Saturn Vue can get you to the meeting on time. Unless you turn on the 6-speaker stereo.
Coffin's trial is supposed to begin in October, then November, but Captain Matt's investigation stalls. Coffin will spend almost a year in custody before Dorion has lined up his witnesses and is ready to go to court. Bill Coffin can only put his faith and his life in the hands of his lawyer, Raymond Mahar. Despite the QPP's year-long investigation, Prosecutor Dorion has very little evidence, and it's all circumstantial. There's nothing wrong with circumstantial evidence, but juries are more persuaded by guns, knives, and fingerprints. And there is a gun, hidden in the bush, borrowed from one of Coffin's friends. Coffin tells the police about it, but surprisingly, they don't immediately go and pick it up. Lawyer Raymond Mahar beats them to it. Mahar and his assistant, Jean-Guy Hamel, drive to Coffin's cabin in the dead of night with Coffin's brother, Donald. They find the borrowed rifle wrapped in an army cape under a tree and throw it into the back of the car.
So he took the gun, he brought it back to his hotel room, and he dismantled it. And on his way back to Quebec City a few days later, he threw the gun, or the parts of the gun, over the bridge, or the Quebec Bridge.
By the time police arrive, the rifle is at the bottom of the St. Lawrence River. Mahar's bizarre act makes it appear his client had arranged to get rid of the rifle.
He was convinced that Coffin was innocent, and one way to win the case is to have the weapon or the arm of the crime disappear. If you don't have it, it doesn't help the crown.
One of Bill Coffin's biggest problems in the trial is an unguarded talk he had with his father. Captain Matt set up the father-son meeting after failing to coerce Coffin into a confession. Matt arranged to have an officer eavesdrop on the conversation. Out from under Matt's bullying for the first time in 16 days, Bill Coffin blurts out, "Dad, they are not man enough to break me."
And he thought he had a moment of privacy with his father. Matt, of course, had an officer listen closely, and he did say to his father, you know, they've tried, meaning they've spent 16 days interrogating me, and they will not break me. That statement should never have been admitted. It was ambivalent at the best, It was a statement of innocence as far as I'm concerned, but for the prosecutor to be able to argue that it was a confession, and then he doesn't get on the stand to say, no, what I meant is they won't break me because there's nothing to break, I'm an innocent man. That statement that Matt set up for him to say hurt Mr. Coffin tremendously.
Damaging testimony also comes from a neighbor who says he saw what looked like a gun barrel in the back of Coffin's truck around the time of the murders.
There was evidence from somebody at the trial that he saw a gun muzzle at the back of Wilbert Coffin's truck coming out of the woods. And yet Wilbert Coffin doesn't get on the stand and say, I did not have a gun. And that very man later on swears an affidavit saying, you know, I didn't see any hole in the muzzle. Could have been a rod, just an iron rod. I never saw a trigger. I never saw any mechanism. I could be dead wrong. And in fact, I'm probably dead wrong. Well, the cross-examination was ineffectual.
Witness after witness takes the stand to describe how Coffin had paid $10 to have his truck pulled out of a ditch, how many drinks he bought, how much he tipped. Although the total adds up to only a fraction of the amount missing from Lindsay's wallet, the sheer volume of testimony gives the jury the impression Coffin had been throwing money around. The QPP spends months tracking every penny Coffin spent on his journey to Montreal to visit Mary and Petrie and their son Jimmy. American hunter Eugene Lindsay was a loan shark who liked to flash large rolls of cash. His empty wallet was said to contain anything from $650 to $2,600 US. To Captain Matt, that has to be the motive for a triple murder. Then Marion Petrie, Coffin's common-law wife, takes the stand. Her testimony, coerced from her by Matt's police team in a Montreal jail cell, is terribly damaging. She tells the court that when Coffin came to see her, he brought their son Jimmy a gift, a very special knife owned by young Richard Lindsay. And he carried a suitcase from the American hunter's truck. Coffin had an explanation to account for the knife in the suitcase. He told police that when he was heading home the day after dropping off the fuel pump, he found the American's truck abandoned. He waited for them for a few hours. He was drinking. And when no one showed up, he stole some items from the truck and went home. But he never got a chance to tell his story to the jury.
According to the prosecution, if you have the thief, you have the murderer. Well, we always had the thief. Coffin confessed to being the thief, and he tried to make the confession of being a thief proof that he's the murderer, and it's not. It's only one step along the way. You cannot jump from thief to murderer in this case.
Raymond Mahar flatly refuses to let Bill Coffin take the stand in his own defense.
He forgot that Gaspesians wanted one thing. They wanted to hear Bill Coffin say, I didn't do it. That's all they wanted. And he could have said that, and could have done that, and could have survived any cross-examination by these two hotshot prosecutors.
Mahar takes mysterious trips during the trial and tells anyone who will listen that he will produce 100 witnesses to prove Coffin's innocence. But when it's time for the defense to present its case, Mahar rises and says only, the defense rests.
It's impossible to imagine the impact on the jury when his own lawyer stood up at the end of the case and said he had interviewed over 100 witnesses and they were going to call 100 witnesses, and then the next day calls no witnesses, including Coffin. The error was breathtaking in terms of the impact that that had to have on the jury, especially since Wilbert Coffin himself wanted to testify.
Marie Stewart says she felt like screaming.
And I often wonder if I had have caused a commotion in the courtroom, would it have done any good? You know, all these questions go through your mind time and time again. Was there anything we could have done differently?
driver said this. Car guide said this. The Globe and Mail said this. But all you really need to hear is this. The all-new Pontiac Grand Prix, built for drivers.
Trip Rewards, another reason why Ramada Canada is a very good place to be. Book online at ramada.ca.
You chose to play follow the leader and disobey the highway railway crossing signals. This could be the next 60 seconds of your life. Last year, 33 people were killed in level crossing collisions. These are all preventable. Remember, neither a passenger nor a freight train can swerve out of your path. Crossing signals start 20 seconds before the train arrives at the crossing. Don't disobey highway railway crossing signals. It could cost you your life and the lives of those you love. A message from Direction 2006 and Operation Lifesaver.
Jack, I've decided to plan ahead.
Is that so?
Yeah. See, the fact is, I'm not going to be around forever. And if I were to go tomorrow, I'd hate to leave the family with nothing. So I called AIG Assurance, and I took out their Guaranteed Life Plus.
Really?
Yeah, I'll tell you how it works.
If you're between 40 and 75, you're guaranteed to be accepted for Guaranteed Life Plus from AIG Assurance. Call the toll-free number today. No salesperson will visit. Your premiums, as low as $20 a month, will never increase, and your coverage will never decrease. Guaranteed. And in the case of accidental death, your beneficiary will receive 5 times your coverage. Tax-free.
Sure does make sense. That's why I got Guaranteed Life Plus 2 years ago.
Call AIG Assurance today at 1-877-789-2240 for your free information kit. Ask for extension 295. Protect your family.
You're invited to a streaking party. Herbal Essences Highlights, with our unique highlighting comb and color guide formula for gorgeous streaks of evenly spaced highlights.
Is this the streaking party?
Herbal Essences Highlights.
There's a fine line between pleasure and pain. Your muscles will let you know when you've crossed it. Tylenol 8 Hour, with 1 layer for fast relief and a second layer that delivers relief for up to 8 hours. Tylenol 8 Hour, because after you push your muscles this hard and pain strikes, you're going to need fast, long-lasting relief. Tylenol 8 Hour for muscle pain. For a special trial offer, call 1-800-4-TYLENOL.
When Coffin's lawyer announced the defense rests, Wilbert Coffin lost his one and only chance to tell a court his story of what happened on that Gaspé logging road. No judge would ever hear of the yellow Jeep. No Gaspé neighbor serving on a jury would ever hear him say, "I didn't kill them." No court would see the affidavits of people who paid him various sums of money in the weeks before he drove to Montreal.
No weapon is ever found. No bullets are ever found. The bodies are torn apart and mutilated and decayed. And all we know is that one of the bodies found has a bullet hole through its chest. We don't know what happened. And the specter of these 2 other Americans who were there, which looms so large, probably more so after the trial, to me creates a tremendous doubt about whether Coffin, on this very weak circumstantial evidence, should have been convicted.
The jury takes only 30 minutes to reach a verdict. Guilty.
To sit in the courthouse and hear a verdict like that, you can't begin to imagine what it's like.
The judge sentences him to hang by the neck until dead. His date with the hangman is set for November 26, 1954. Then the courts begin a cat-and-mouse game with Wilbert Coffin. 7 times he is given a reprieve and a measure of hope. Each time he is again consigned to the gallows. Raymond Mahar leaves his client at that point. His assistant, young Francois Gravel, totally convinced of Coffin's innocence, launches the first of many appeals. He persuades Arthur Maloney, a brilliant Toronto defense lawyer and future member of Parliament, to join him. An automatic appeal to Quebec's appellate court results in the first of 7 stays of execution. Post-trial publicity brings forward a number of witnesses who say they had seen a Jeep with a yellow plywood cab in the area of the murders. Some of the witnesses seem credible, including a doctor and his wife from Toronto.
We do know after the case, when Arthur Maloney's at a cocktail party when he's retained to do the appeal, and people say that they actually saw a yellow truck with this cab on the back of it that put another 2 Americans there.
When the Quebec Court of Appeal sustains the conviction of Wilbert Coffin, Gravel and Maloney go to Ottawa to ask for a hearing before the Supreme Court of Canada. It's midsummer and the court is on vacation. Only one justice is on duty for emergencies. Justice Abbott is a new appointee, a Liberal politician who hasn't practiced law for 14 years. He alone has the power to order a new trial for Wilbert Coffin. He refuses, and the case goes to the Minister of Justice. The government refers the case back to the Supreme Court of Canada. It seals Coffin's fate.
The Supreme Court of Canada couldn't consider the new evidence. They couldn't consider all the sightings of the yellow truck. They couldn't consider the fresh evidence. All they could consider was the trial. Did he have a fair trial on the evidence that was presented? And so he got his reference, and then they cut the legs out from under him on the reference and denied him the ability to inject the new evidence to say, I deserve a new trial. I mean, it's a total disgrace.
Coffin is given yet another date for his appointment with the hangman, September 23rd, 1955. On September 6th, Marie Stewart is listening to the radio at her home in the Gaspé when she hears some shattering news about her brother.
They said that he had fashioned a gun out of a bar of soap. And he'd got the guard, made the guard open the door. And then he just left.
Wilbert Coffin has escaped from his cell in the Quebec City jail. Quebec police organize a manhunt for a criminal they describe as armed and dangerous.
He was such a woodsman. I stood at the window the whole night long and prayed for him not to give himself up until we could do something. Because they never would have found him. If he had gone in the bush, they never would have found him.
Coffin makes it outside the jail with no difficulty. He is not pursued. He hails a passing cab and orders the cabbie to drive him across the Quebec Bridge to the south shore of the St. Lawrence. On the way to the bridge, he tells his story to the sympathetic cab driver. After talking to the cabbie, Coffin decides not to run. They turn around, and Coffin asks the driver to take him to the home of his lawyer, Francois Gravel. But Gravel is out of town. Coffin then asks him to take him to the home of Raymond Mahar, the man who had so badly bungled his defense. They go to Mahar's home, where Mahar persuades Coffin to give himself up before he is shot by police. Lying on the floor of the cab, Coffin goes back to jail. Mahar has persuaded him that he will get a new trial if he returns.
For someone to voluntarily give themselves up, knowing what they were facing, a guilty person wouldn't do that.
Francois Gravel and Arthur Maloney seek every legal avenue in their desperate battle to save Coffin from the noose. They petition the cabinet to order a new trial and are turned down. They seek a cabinet order of commutation. Pushed back again and again, the date of the execution is finally set for February 9th, 1956. Coffin is transferred to Montreal's Bordeaux prison, the only one in Quebec with a scaffold. Gravel tells him his only remaining hope is commutation by the cabinet. It is not likely, for Maurice Duplessis has been enraged by Ottawa's reconsideration of the case. Criminal justice, he roars, is a matter of provincial jurisdiction. Marie Stuart sees her brother only once after his conviction, in Bordeaux.
He didn't like us seeing him there. You know, I just wanted to put my arms around him and hug him and kiss him.
Bill Coffin's final request is a death row marriage to Marion Petrie to legitimize their son. Francois Gravel wins permission from the Quebec government. But when Duplessis hears of this, he stops the wedding. On the night of February 9th, Bill Coffin is told the federal government has refused to commute his sentence. The prison chaplain, one of many people who have come to believe in his innocence, prepares him for his last walk. Captain Matt is there as a witness. Shortly after midnight, the hangman drops the trap.
Next week, the massive forest fire that ravaged northern Ontario in 1916. Then, confronting 19th century birth control laws in 20th century Ontario. Next week on History Television.
No matter what your style, if you need mild bladder protection, Tenna has it all. Tenna's Dry Active line. 3 sizes to fit your needs. All are thin and discreet, with superior absorbency and powerful odor control. The Tenna Dry Active line. Forget your worries, not your style. For free sample, call 1-877-GET-TENNA.
At many tropical destinations, including the Caribbean, you could catch serious liver diseases called hepatitis A or B. Many different ways. For hepatitis A, it could be as easy as 1 contaminated ice cube.
That looks great.
So help protect yourself. Ask your doctor about Twinrix vaccinations now. Dual protection against hepatitis A and B.
Sweep away odors and leave even sports stuff fresh air clean with Febreze every day.
How do you celebrate? A sports night with the boys? A barbecue? Or maybe a black tie dinner? KitchenAid Cook for the Cure is inviting Canadians to celebrate and raise up to $1 million this year for breast cancer research. How can you help? Next time you throw a party, any party, invite your guests to make a donation to the Canadian Breast Cancer Foundation instead of bringing a gift for you. It's that simple. For your free party hosting guide, visit KitchenAidCookForTheCure.ca or call 1-800-618-CURE.
Love to get back your hair's fullness and strength? New from Pantene, introducing Full and Thick. Created for millions of women with thin hair, the amplifying Pantene Pro V system penetrates deep into every strand. Hair looks thicker and stronger in 10 days, guaranteed. Now you're looking full and thick again. New Pantene Full and Thick. That's the beauty of healthy-looking hair.
My name's Sheila Rogers. You're listening to Sounds Like Canada on CBC Radio.
I love making music so much.
That is so beautiful.
Well, that's the thing about music. It's such a gift.
How do we know if we're happy?
Our emotions are a good indicator of how happy we are, but there's also
What are
another
they saying? They're saying, welcome, Sheila. There are about 1,000 students out in the yard yelling. And that's where we're brought. I had a Zamboni lesson, and man, was I bad.
Well, how can you be bad?
Bill Coffin's body is returned to the Gaspé a few days later, accompanied by his mother and one of his sisters. More than 500 people gather at the train station in a show of support for the Coffin family.
Well, if you could have been here the night my mom and sister brought my brother home, the crowd at the station was terrific, and all of them were backing us. They were there for support.
Wilbert Coffin is buried in consecrated ground behind the Anglican Church. At the request of Coffin's mother, Reverend Harold Church reads a sentence from a letter Coffin wrote a few hours before his death. "I am not guilty, and may God have mercy on my soul." His mother also orders the epitaph on his gravestone to read, "Judge not, that ye be not judged."
There's not many days that go by that I don't think of him. Wondering what we could have done differently, if anything. If there's anything that we could have done that would have saved him.
They hanged a man who had never been proven guilty beyond a reasonable doubt. It's very easy to say this was an enormous miscarriage of justice.
The books I have written are not kind to the justice system of our country, and especially of the province of Quebec, in the time of Duplessis.
Jacques Hébert's books about the case raise a furor in Quebec. Finally, the government launches an inquiry into the fairness of Wilbert Coffin's trial. The Brassard inquiry finds nothing wrong with the trial and no cause to condemn police or prosecution. A public opinion poll finds 79% of Quebec residents think the inquiry got it wrong. Jacques Hébert is cited by the Brassard inquiry for contempt of court for his accusations against the judge and the prosecutors at Coffin's trial. He is arrested at his Montreal home and taken to a jail cell in Quebec City. Pierre Trudeau, in his last appearance in his lawyer's robes, gets Hébert out in 3 days. The Coffin case and the public's belief that an innocent man had been hanged helped Trudeau to persuade Parliament to abolish capital punishment in 1976.
The conviction of Pierre Trudeau had been set a long time before that. You see, he was against capital punishment for as long as I know him, so the Coffin case had not much to do with changing or his mind on it. The only thing that it could have done was that it helped a lot in public opinion to convince people that if an innocent man could be hanged, that maybe capital punishment was not such a good idea.
Coffin's execution added to the mounting doubt around capital punishment. The last hanging in Canada took place in Toronto's Don Jail in 1962. Half a century has passed since the execution of Wilbert Coffin, but for Marie Stewart, the terrible pain never goes away.
I miss him still. It's been a very heartbreaking thing to have to cope with. But how much worse it was for him. And if we had it to do over again, I wouldn't have kept quiet like we were all told to. Don't say anything, just let the lawyer handle it. I would have caused the biggest stink in that courtroom if I had it to do over again.
Wilbert Coffin's son Jimmy traveled to the Gaspé with his own son years ago. After that, his Aunt Marie never heard from him again.
We thought that he would keep in touch. I have no idea. And it's heartbreaking, you know, to know that he's out there and his son's out there and we don't know where they are or how they're doing, how life's treating them.
Whether or not he's now 45 years dead or whether he's 100 years dead, I think we will always go back to the Coffin case because there'll always be somebody in the House of Commons who says, let's bring back the death penalty. And the simple answer to that person will always be Wilbert Coffin.
With Rex versus Coffin, Canadians realized that courts make mistakes, often tragic mistakes. But Wilbert Coffin's death was not in vain. His hanging made many members of Parliament question the death penalty. Today, those falsely convicted of murder remain alive in prison, able to fight for their freedom, because Bill Coffin was found guilty in history's courtroom.